And here is Eddie Cochran, his crazy guitar, and Teenage Heaven.
I want a house with a pool, shorter hours in school.
Rock and roll became popular in the late 40s and early 50s. Rock and roll is a combination of African American blues, jump blues, country, jazz, and gospel music. The early 40s rock and roll used mainly piano and saxophone as lead instruments. This later switched to guitars in the mid-50s. Classic rock and roll is usually played with two electric guitars, a string bass or an electric bass guitar, and a drum kit. Beyond a musical genre, rock and roll influenced lifestyle, fashion, attitudes, and language.
Well, when I originally started getting interested in music, my uncle was a trumpet player in the big band days with Dorsey and Goodman and all the players. And I played trumpet in the all through grade school and junior high band until rock and roll started and Elvis came out, and I threw the trumpet down and picked up a guitar. So that's how I got started, and I listened to. I was in on the birth of rock and roll, which was really a wonderful time. And it was so important to us at that time because we didn't have any other music except what our parents listened to. Big bands, Sinatra, Bing Crosby, Harry Gum, etc. And so, kids these days don't really understand. There was just a small pocket there that was just ours. Now there's so much music and so many different genres. There wasn't then. It was just what we listened to from our parents, and there was just the radio, and that was it. That was the only thing you listened to. That's what made it broke records. So I listened to all the early rock and roll. Obviously, living in the Texas Panhandle, I was influenced greatly by Buddy Holly and a lot of the rock and roll things. And wound up recording at the Norman Petty Studios where Buddy Holly recorded. He was my manager. That's how I got started.
Awesome.
Chuck Berry, obviously, as a guitar player, was in the early rock days. Scotty Moore, who was Elvis's guitar player, was a big influence on me as a guitar player. Later got to know in Nashville, who was really wonderful, all those guys. Chet Atkins at an early age as a guitar player. But all the early rock guys and the early R&B rock guys and black artists were all very influential in how I felt about music at that time.
Elvis Presley was born in 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi. His career started in 1954 when he moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and began working with the owner of Sun Records, Sam Phillips. Phillips wanted to make African American music more widely accessible. Elvis, Bill Black, and Scotty Moore created a fusion of country and rhythm blues with a backbeat-driven yet upbeat tempo and a sense of rockabilly. This new genre later became known as rock and roll. His first single, Heartbreak Hotel, released in 1956. It was a #1 hit. After that, he quickly rose to the top of the charts and became a leading figure in the world of rock and roll. He is still known today as the king of rock and roll.
Actually, I think as far as the interest in music was concerned, it was actually my uncle. But after rock and roll came out, there was a lot of the early artists, and I probably have already answered that. Elvis, Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, multiple influences back at that time. Of course, you have to understand, as opposed to now, where there's thousands of artists and thousands of venues for them to get their music played. There was no internet, no computers, not really much TV, 3 channels, and we didn't have any music things except the Ed Sullivan Show, which, people who already had hits were on there. So it was just the radio, and I was influenced by that entirely.
Awesome.
Eddie Cochran was born in Albert Lea, Minnesota in 1938. He was involved with music from an early age, and in 1955 he began a songwriting career with Jerry Capehart. His first success was when he performed the song 20 Flight Rock in the movie The Girl Can't Help It. Due to this performance, Liberty Records signed a contract with him. His career ended abruptly when he was 21. He was on his UK tour when he was killed in an automobile accident. Though his best-known songs were released while he was alive, most of his songs were released after his death in 1960.
Well, I started playing with, I had my own little band, and there was a guy out of, that was just a couple years older than I was, out of Amarillo, Texas. I'm from Pampa, which was 50 miles from Amarillo. And he had recorded over at the Petty Studios in Clovis, and his name was Jimmy Gilmer. And he needed a guitar player, and had heard about me, so he called me, and I went and did a gig with him, and I played with him for a while. And because of his affiliation with the Norman Petty Studios, I got involved with Norman and started recording over there. I later played and still play with Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs, who had some early big rock hits, Sugar Shack, Bottle of Wine, and they also had some early instrumental hits called Torque and Bulldog. They're kind of a famous, they originally were from Raton, but Jimmy was from Amarillo. And I went on from there. I started when I was 16. I went on to the University of Southern California and wound up going to school with a guy named Lenny Warnker, whose father owned Liberty Records, and I wound up signing with them, and he was a big buddy of Randy Newman, who wins all kinds of Academy Awards now. He was a good friend of mine I went to school with. So through them, I was signed to Liberty, and I've played with guys I used on my sessions then were guys like Glenn Campbell and people that were just session players at the time, before they got big. I played with numerous artists. I wound up having a production company with David Gates and Leon Russell, who had just moved out from Tulsa. And David was the founder and did all the writing and producing for a group called Bread that had a lot of hits, Make It With You, If, and Diary, a lot of huge things. And I guess I've played on stage with Roy Orbison. When I was younger, I co-produced with Chet Atkins when I worked for RCA in Nashville. Worked with, did an album on Willie Nelson and the country genre. A lot of guys out there. So I've, worked with a lot of artists. Yeah, been very, very fortunate.
Singer-songwriter Buddy Holly was born in 1936 in Lubbock, Texas. In 1955, he saw Elvis Presley in concert, which influenced him to begin adding a rockabilly sound to his music. Holly formed his own band, the Crickets, along with Nikki Sullivan, Joe B. Molden, and Jerry Allison. They first recorded with producer Owen Bradley and then began recording at Petty Studios in Clovis, New Mexico. Their first single was chart topper That'll Be the Day. It was #1 on the Billboard US bestsellers in stores and #1 on the UK single chart. They later performed it on The Ed Sullivan Show. His career was also short-lived as he was killed in a plane crash along with Richie Valens and J.P. Richardson in 1959. He was 22.
Well, it was so limited, as I told you, when rock first started, there were just a handful of labels, and there were artists and the records that came out. You could almost count them on two hands, and I knew back then, I knew almost every record that was out that you heard on the radio. I knew the A-side and the artist and all the lyrics, and probably the B-side too, so there wasn't that much to keep up with. And it was very creative. There were lots of small labels from different parts of the country, Shreveport, Sun Records in Memphis, of course Nashville, Norman Petty Studios in Clovis, in addition to the New York pop groups and the doo-wop and all that, and the California groups, the Beach Boys and all that stuff. So there was a lot of different types of music coming from a lot of different places, and you could really create back then. It was all new, so you didn't have any boundaries. There were no rules. So even though you wound up getting a lot of bad stuff because of that, you got a lot of really inventive, creative things. It was very nice, and it was so different than today. It's just gotten just so digitalized, as is in the computer age. It's just evolved to that, and I don't know whether that's good or not. Even when they go in and record it in the studio today, they don't. They used to just get all the musicians in one room, and in the old days there was, at the most 8 tracks, 4 tracks, a lot of the stuff. So you had to, everybody got in the studio, and you had to, when you walked out, you had the record. Now it takes months. They may start with a click track and a drum machine and a keyboard or something, and overdub everything, and they'll do something in the studio, go to their house and add stuff on, and just keep stacking and stacking. There's multiple tracks, and you might not even know or even see the musician or the singers that you wind up on the record with. And I think they lose a little magic in that, because there's no real interaction between the players and the musicians like there was when you were all in the studio at the same time.
Rock and roll was a mix of several types of music that became very popular in the 40s and 50s. Everything from country to gospel music was incorporated into the new genre. Rock and roll influenced lifestyle, fashion, attitude, and slang. Many people believe it is one of the only genres of music that influenced an entire generation and age group. Artists like Elvis, Buddy Holly, and Eddie Cochran not only created music that was popular at the time, they also influenced musicians for years and continue to be regarded as pioneers in the music industry.
Actually, I think there are a lot of great artists out there now. There are so many. You can turn on The Voice or American Idol and see how much talent is out there. It's just unbelievable. I don't. There's so many good ones. I think they're not quite as individualistic as they were in the old days. I don't hear uniqueness in voices. I hear great voices, but I don't hear as much uniqueness as I used to at the beginning of early rock and some of the early days. You turned on a record, or you knew who that person was. They've had such an individual style. I don't hear as much of that anymore as I used to. There's some great talent out there. As far as artists, there are just so many. Stewart. I still like some of the legit artists like Michael Bublé or something, but many of the artists that we talk about in church that you listen to, I enjoy very much. There's just so much good music out there that I can't really place my finger on one. There's still some artists like from the 70s and things that I enjoy, but I don't know as much as far now. There's between hip hop and rap and all the different genres. Can keep up with it. I don't listen to a lot of it as rap. And rap is about the only thing I really don't care a lot about. But all the other genres, I respect the individuals very much. There's a lot of talent out there.
When I put 'em on, I'm raring to go.